To understand where we came from, we need to go to a world that existed even before the dinosaurs. This was the Permian period, a time when all the continents were joined into one giant supercontinent Pangaea. Imagine this. All the land on Earth was one single, massive piece of land, stretching from the South Pole to the North Pole. Around it was the endless Panthalassa Ocean. The Permian period began 300 million years ago and ended 252 million years ago. It was a time of great change. The climate was getting drier, the huge swampy forests of the Carboniferous period were disappearing, giving way to deserts and steppes. But life was thriving, adapting to new conditions. And in this world lived our most distant ancestors. They were called synapsids. They weren't mammals, not yet. And they weren't reptiles, although they might have looked like them. This was a special group of animals that would eventually give rise to all mammals, including us. The synapsids were diverse. Among them were true giants. Imagine Dimetrodon, a creature up to 3.5 meters long with a huge sail on its back. This sail, formed by long spines of the vertebrae covered with skin, might have been used for temperature regulation. In the morning, Dimetrodon would turn its sail to the sun, warm up faster than other animals, and could start hunting earlier. Dimetrodon had a large head with powerful jaws full of sharp teeth of different sizes. It was a predator, one of the top hunters of its time. There were also herbivorous giants. Idaphosaurus, a relative of Dimetrodon, but it ate plants. It also had a sail on its back, possibly for the same purpose, regulating body temperature. Its jaws were lined with many small teeth, adapted for grinding tough vegetation. And among the synapsids were the ancestors of mammals, a group called the therapsids. They appeared in the middle of the Permian about 270 million years ago. Therapsids were more advanced than their predecessors. They began to develop a special skull structure with an opening behind the eye, a feature that all mammals would inherit. One of the most famous therapsids was Inostrancevia. It was a large predator, the size of a modern bear. Its body could reach up to 3.5 meters in length. Inostrancevia had a massive skull with huge, saber-like canine teeth that could reach 12 centimeters in length. These fangs stuck out of its mouth even when it was closed. Inostrancevia was at the top of the food chain in the late Permian. It hunted large herbivorous therapsids. Among the herbivorous therapsids, a notable one was moschops, a massive animal the size of a cow or a small hippopotamus. The skull of moschops was very thick, especially on the forehead. Males might have used these thickenings in fights, butting heads like modern sheep. Moschops was a clumsy, slow-moving creature with short but powerful legs. It fed on tough vegetation, grinding it with its cheek teeth. Gradually, therapsids became more and more mammal-like. Many of them developed differentiated teeth. Incisors, canines, and cheek teeth, each with its own function. This was a huge step forward. Reptiles usually had uniform teeth, but therapsids' teeth specialized, allowing them to process food more efficiently. Moreover, some advanced therapsids might have already begun to develop fur. Coprolites, fossilized droppings, have been found containing long, hollow structures that look like hair remains. This suggests some therapsids may have had primitive fur. Therapsids dominated the Permian period. They were the most numerous and diverse land vertebrates. It seemed their future was secure. But then, disaster struck. 252 million years ago, Earth faced the greatest catastrophe in its history. This event is called the Permian-Triassic extinction or the Great Dying. What exactly happened? Scientists still debate the causes. Possibly it was a series of massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. These eruptions continued for hundreds of thousands of years, spewing enormous amounts of ash, dust, carbon dioxide, and poisonous gases into the atmosphere. The sky darkened, temperatures first dropped because of the ash blocking sunlight, then rose sharply due to the greenhouse effect from carbon dioxide. The oceans began to lose oxygen. Hydrogen sulfide, a deadly gas, accumulated on the seafloor. The water became more acidic. Marine life died en masse. On land, things were even worse. Forests burned. Dust and ash covered the ground. Plants died from lack of sunlight. Herbivores lost their food sources. Predators were left without prey. The scale of the catastrophe was terrifying. 95% of all marine species died. 95%. Just imagine, out of every 20 species in the ocean, only one survived. On land, 70% of all land vertebrate families went extinct. It was the most massive extinction in our planet's history. Among the dead were many therapsids. All the pelycosaurs disappeared, those animals with sails on their backs, like Dimetrodon. Many large predatory and herbivorous therapsids went extinct, but not all. Some managed to survive. Among them were representatives of 3 therapsid groups: large herbivorous dicynodonts with characteristic 2 tusks and a beak-like mouth, small therocephalians, probably feeding on insects, and, most important for us, the cynodonts, small creatures that were the most advanced of all therapsids. Cynodonts were about the size of a rat or a small dog. Their name means dog teeth. They had well-developed canines and differentiated teeth. Cynodonts had a more efficient breathing system. Their jaws became more mobile. They might have already had real fur and warm-bloodedness, although this is hard to prove from fossils. These small cynodonts survived the catastrophe. Perhaps because they were small and needed less food. Perhaps because they could hide in burrows where the temperature was more stable. Perhaps because they were omnivores and could eat whatever they found: insects, seeds, small animals. The recovery of life after the Great Dying took millions of years. The Permian world was gone forever. A new period began, the Triassic. The first period of the Mesozoic era, the era that would go down in history as the age of dinosaurs. After the Great Dying, Earth slowly healed. The Triassic period began 252 million years ago. The climate gradually stabilized, though it remained hot and dry. Pangaea was still one continent. Life was reborn. In this new world, new rulers appeared. During the Triassic, a group of reptiles called archosaurs emerged, ruling lizards. Several evolutionary lines came from them. One line gave rise to crocodiles. Another led to pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that would dominate the skies. And a third became the ancestors of dinosaurs. The first dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago, in the middle of the Triassic. They were small, only 1 or 2 meters long. They walked on their 2 hind legs, were fast and agile. One of the earliest was Eoraptor, the dawn thief. It was the size of a large dog, weighing about 10 kilograms. Eoraptor was an omnivore, eating both small animals and plants. Another early dinosaur was Herrerasaurus. It was larger, reaching 3 to 6 meters in length. It was a predator with sharp teeth and powerful jaws. Herrerasaurus already showed features that would become characteristic of predatory dinosaurs. Powerful hind legs for fast running, short forelimbs with claws for grasping prey, and a long tail for balance. At first, dinosaurs didn't dominate. The Triassic was a time of great diversity. Alongside dinosaurs lived other reptiles, amphibians, and of course, our ancestors, the therapsids, who continue to evolve. But then, around 201 million years ago, another mass extinction occurred, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. It wasn't as catastrophic as the Permian-Triassic, but about half of all species still died out. The causes are again unclear, possibly volcanic activity linked to the beginning of Pangaea's breakup. After this extinction, dinosaurs gained their advantage. They began to rapidly increase in size and diversity. The Jurassic period began, the time when dinosaurs truly came to rule the earth. Giant sauropods appeared, long-necked, herbivorous dinosaurs. Brachiosaurus reached 25 meters in length and weighed up to 60 tons. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, giving it a characteristic posture with a high raised neck. Brachiosaurus could reach foliage at a height of 13 meters, higher than a 4-story building. Diplodocus was even longer, up to 35 meters from nose to tail tip, though it weighed less, about 15 tons. Its long neck and even longer tail, like a whip, made it one of the most recognizable dinosaurs. Predatory dinosaurs also grew. Allosaurus was one of the top predators of the Jurassic. Up to 12 meters long, weighing up to 2 tons with huge jaws full of sharp teeth. Allosaurus hunted large prey, maybe even young sauropods. In the skies, pterosaurs soared. Pterodactyl pteranodon with wingspans up to 7 meters. They caught fish and small animals. In the seas, marine reptiles ruled. Ichthyosaurs resembling dolphins, plesiosaurs with long necks, enormous pliosaurs, predators with massive skulls and powerful jaws. Dinosaurs were everywhere. They occupied every ecological niche, from small, fast hunters the size of a chicken to giants shaking the ground with their weight. And where were our ancestors during this time? While dinosaurs ruled the world, cynodonts continued to evolve. And finally, around 225 to 200 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic or beginning of the Jurassic, an event of utmost importance occurred. The first true mammals appeared. The boundary between advanced cynodonts and the first mammals is blurred. Scientists debate which features truly make an animal a mammal. But generally, true mammals had warm-bloodedness, the ability to maintain a constant body temperature, fur or hair, mammary glands to feed their young, a special middle ear structure with 3 bones, and a specific jaw structure. The first mammals were tiny. Imagine an animal the size of a mouse, body length 10 to 20 centimeters, weight a few dozen grams, covered in fur, with sharp little teeth. These creatures led a secretive life. They were nocturnal animals, hiding from the dinosaurs. During the day, they stayed in burrows underground or in cracks between rocks. At night, when most dinosaurs slept, they came out to hunt. They ate insects, worms, maybe seeds and fruits. Why were they so small? This was evolutionary pressure from the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were diurnal animals. They dominated every level of the food chain. Large mammals would have been easy prey for predatory dinosaurs. Small ones could hide, remain unnoticed. Moreover, being small and nocturnal, early mammals occupied an ecological niche that didn't interest the dinosaurs. They specialized in hunting insects in the dark. This required developing special skills, sharp hearing, a good sense of smell, the ability to move and react quickly. One of the early mammals was Morganucodon, which lived about 205 million years ago. Its remains have been found in Europe and Asia. Morganucodon was the size of a shrew, about 10 centimeters long, weighing around 20 to 30 grams. It had sharp teeth for hunting insects. Morganucodon could probably climb trees where it could catch insects and hide from predators. Fossils show that Morganucodon had fur. Impressions of hairs were preserved on some specimens. This means it was warm-blooded. Warm-bloodedness was a huge advantage at night when temperatures dropped. Dinosaurs, being cold-blooded or partially warm-blooded, became sluggish during cool night hours, but mammals remained active. In the Jurassic, about 164 million years ago, lived Castorocauda lutrasimilis. Beaver tail, otter-like. This was a remarkable creature. It weighed about half a kilogram, a giant by early mammal standards. Castorocauda had a flat, scaly tail like a beaver's, webbing between the toes of its hind feet, and fur with 2 layers, soft underfur and coarse guard hairs. This suggests Castorocauda was a semi-aquatic animal, spending much time in the water catching fish and aquatic invertebrates. The discovery of Castorocauda showed that even in the Jurassic, mammals were beginning to explore diverse ecological niches. In the Cretaceous, around 130 million years ago, even larger mammals appeared. Repenomamus was the size of a badger, weighing between 12 and 14 kilograms. It was a predatory mammal. In the stomach of one fossil Repenomamus, remains of a small dinosaur were found. This shows that mammals weren't always the victims. Sometimes they could hunt young or small dinosaurs themselves, but Repenomamus was an exception. Most mammals of the Mesozoic era remained small. They lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, unnoticed, secretive, but steadily evolving. Over those 160 million years, while the age of dinosaurs lasted, mammals developed many important adaptations. Their brains became more complex, especially the areas responsible for smell, hearing, and coordination. Their teeth became more specialized. The first mammal groups appeared: monotremes, ancestors of the modern platypus and echidna, marsupials, and placentals, the group we belong to. And then, 66 million years ago, everything changed. 66 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period, an asteroid fell from the sky. It struck Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The asteroid was huge, about 10 kilometers in diameter. It was traveling at roughly 20 kilometers per second. When it hit, it released energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. The impact created a crater 180 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. A shock wave swept across the entire planet. Huge amounts of molten debris were thrown into the atmosphere and even into space. As this debris fell back down, it ignited forests all over the world. The sky filled with smoke, soot, dust, and water vapor. Sunlight couldn't penetrate this veil. An impact winter began. Temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis stopped. Plants began to die. Without plants, herbivores began to die. Without herbivores, predators starved. In the oceans, it was even worse. Plankton, the base of the marine food chain, died off massively. Fish, marine reptiles, and ammonites followed. The oceans became nearly lifeless. This event is called the Cretaceous Paleogene Extinction Event. About 75% of all species on Earth died. The dinosaurs couldn't survive this catastrophe. All non-avian dinosaurs went extinct. The giant sauropods, the mighty tyrannosaurs, the triceratops with their impressive horns, all perished. The only dinosaurs that survived were small feathered dinosaurs that could fly. They evolved into birds. The pterosaurs also died out completely. The marine reptiles, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, vanished. And what about the mammals? They survived. Not all, of course. Many mammal species also went extinct. But enough survived the catastrophe? Why could mammals survive while dinosaurs couldn't? First, they were small. Small animals need less food. When food became scarce, large dinosaurs starved quickly. But small mammals could survive on tiny amounts. Seeds, insects, carrion. Second, many mammals lived in burrows underground. This protected them from extreme surface temperatures, from fires, from radiation. Burrows were cool in summer and warm in winter. You could hide there and wait out the worst of it. Third, mammals were warm-blooded. When temperatures dropped after the asteroid, dinosaurs, which likely depended on external heat to stay active, became sluggish and weak. Mammals could remain active even in the cold. Fourth, mammals were omnivores or could switch to whatever food was available. They ate anything they could find. Seeds, roots, insects, carrion. Dinosaurs were more specialized, so in a sense, you could say dinosaurs made us who we are. It was the pressure from dinosaurs that forced our ancestors to become small, nocturnal, burrowing, warm-blooded, with good hearing and smell. And it was precisely these traits that saved us when the dinosaurs died. We survived because of the dinosaurs. A paradox. After the dinosaurs went extinct, the world slowly recovered. A new era began. The Cenozoic, the era of new life. Its first period is called the Paleocene. For the first few million years after the catastrophe, ecosystems were simple. Forests regrew, new plant species appeared. Flowering plants, which had begun spreading in the Cretaceous, now became dominant. And in this new world, mammals finally got their chance. Without dinosaurs occupying all the large ecological niches, mammals could evolve and increase in size. In just a few million years, an instant by geological standards, mammals underwent a remarkable adaptive radiation. Hundreds of new species appeared, filling all kinds of niches. Some stayed small, continuing to eat insects. From them came modern shrews, hedgehogs, and moles. Others became larger and began eating plants. From them came herbivores, the ancestors of horses, cows, and deer. Still others became predators, hunting other mammals. From them came the carnivores, ancestors of dogs, cats, and bears. Some mammals returned to the water. Whales, dolphins, and seals appeared. Others learned to fly. Bats emerged. And one group of mammals did something special. They climbed into the trees. Life in the trees wasn't new for mammals. Even in the Mesozoic, some probably climbed trees, escaping predators and hunting insects. But now, in the Cenozoic, an arboreal lifestyle became especially advantageous. Forests were growing and expanding. Trees were full of fruits, seeds, and insects. Tree-dwelling mammals began to develop special adaptations. Their hands became more grasping, with flexible fingers that could wrap around branches. The thumb began to oppose the others, allowing a better grip. Their claws became flat nails so they wouldn't interfere with grasping. Their vision improved. They needed to judge distances accurately when jumping from branch to branch. Their eyes gradually moved to the front of the face, providing binocular vision, the ability to see an object with both eyes at once and judge distance precisely. The brains of these animals grew larger. Life in the trees is complex. You need to make quick decisions. Which branch to jump to, how not to fall, where to find food. It requires good memory, planning ability, and spatial thinking. Thus, primates appeared. Primates are the order of mammals to which we, humans, belong. But the first primates appeared long before us, around 85 to 90 million years ago. The earliest primates were like modern tree shrews, small creatures living in Southeast Asia. They were the size of a squirrel or rat, with long bushy tails, big eyes, and sharp teeth. They ate insects, fruits, and seeds. They spent time both on the ground and in trees. Around 65 to 60 million years ago in the Paleocene, Burgatorius appeared. It was one of the earliest primate-like creatures. Its body was about 10 centimeters long, weighing less than 40 grams. Burgatorius lived in trees, leaping easily from branch to branch. It might have already possessed some primate features: grasping hands, improved vision. In the Eocene, around 55 to 34 million years ago, primates became more diverse. The first true primates appeared with characteristic features: forward-facing eyes for binocular vision, an opposable thumb, flat nails instead of claws, and a relatively large brain. One well-studied early primate is Darwinius macellae, also known as Ida. This creature lived 47 million years ago in what is now Germany. Darwinius was the size of a small cat, about 60 centimeters long, including its tail. It had long limbs adapted for climbing, opposable thumbs on all four hands, and flat nails. Darwinius ate fruits and leaves. Around 33 million years ago, Earth's climate began to change. It grew cooler. Tropical forests, which once covered much of the planet, began to retreat. In higher latitudes, Europe, North America, they disappeared entirely, replaced by deciduous forests and steppes. Many primates couldn't adapt to the cooling. In North America and Europe, they went extinct. Primates survived only in tropical regions, in Africa, South Asia, and Central and South America. In Africa, primates continued to evolve. Around 33 million years ago, the first catarrhines appeared, the group to which all Old World monkeys and apes belong, including us. One early catarrhine was Egyptopithecus, living 33 to 29 million years ago in North Africa. It was the size of a monkey, weighing 3 to 7 kilograms. Egyptopithecus lived in trees and ate fruit. Then, around 23 million years ago, another important split occurred. Two branches separated from the common catarrhine stem: the Cercopithecoids, monkeys like macaques and baboons, and the hominoids, the apes. Apes differed from monkeys in several important ways. They were larger, they had no tail, their bodies were more upright with a broad chest. Their shoulder joints were more mobile, allowing them to rotate their arms and hang from branches. Their brains were relatively larger. And here appears the creature that will become key to our story. Between 21 and 17 million years ago, in the early Miocene in East Africa, lived Proconsul. Proconsul is a genus of early apes. They were about the size of a modern monkey or a small dog. Different species of Proconsul weighed between 10 and 40 kilograms. They lived in tropical forests, spending most of their time in the trees. In appearance, Proconsul combined features of monkeys and the apes. It still had a tail, like a monkey, but its body structure was more ape-like. Its arms and legs were about the same length, not as long as modern apes' arms, but not as short as monkeys. Proconsul moved on all fours along thick branches. It couldn't hang from its arms like modern chimpanzees or gibbons. Its wrists were more primitive, with a mobile central bone, the same as in monkeys. In modern apes and humans, this bone fuses with another during embryonic development. Proconsul's skull had a protruding snout with large canines. Its brain was relatively large for its body size, but still significantly smaller than modern apes. Proconsul ate mainly fruit. Its teeth were adapted for chewing soft fruits. It might also have eaten young leaves and insects. Proconsuls lived in groups. They likely had pronounced sexual dimorphism. Males were significantly larger than females. This often indicates a social structure where males compete for females. Why is Proconsul so important for us? Because it stands at the base of the ape family tree. Proconsul, or a creature very like it, is the common ancestor of all modern apes. Gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. Several evolutionary lines descended from Proconsul. One led to the Asian apes, gibbons and orangutans. Others stayed in Africa and gave rise to the African apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, and the ancestors of humans. After Proconsul, other early apes appeared. Kenyapithecus, living 40 million years ago in Kenya. It had powerful jaws and thick tooth enamel, adapted for chewing tough food. Kenyapithecus may have been one of the first apes to begin moving from dense forests into more open areas. Around 15 million years ago, some apes migrated from Africa into Eurasia. They reached southern Europe, Western Asia, and India. This was a time when the climate was warm and forests extended further north than today. One such migrant was Dryopithecus, living in Europe around 12 to 9 million years ago. Dryopithecus was the size of a modern chimpanzee. It lived in forests, ate fruit, and could probably hang from branches using its long arms. But then the climate changed again. Around 8 million years ago, global cooling began. Forests in Europe and Asia started disappearing, replaced by open landscapes. Many apes in these regions went extinct or retreated back to Africa. In Africa, in the tropics, apes continued to evolve. And it was here, in Africa, that the next important event in our history occurred. Around 7 to 6 million years ago, in Eastern and Central Africa, an important geological event occurred. The Great Rift Valley began to form, a giant crack in the Earth's crust stretching north to south across the entire continent. This rift caused mountain ranges to rise on the eastern side. The mountains changed the climate. Moist winds from the west, bringing rain, were blocked by the mountains. The eastern side received less rainfall. Dense tropical forests began to thin out, replaced by woodlands and savanna. Open landscapes with scattered trees and bushes, covered in grasses. The apes living in these regions faced a challenge. Their familiar habitat was disappearing. The trees where they spent most of their time became scarce. The food they were used to eating, fruit from trees, became harder to find. Those apes that stayed in the western forests, where the climate remained wet, continued to live in trees. From them came modern gorillas and chimpanzees. But some groups of apes in Eastern Africa began to adapt to the new environment. They started spending more time on the ground. This was dangerous. There were more predators on the ground, but it also offered new opportunities. And here occurred one of the most important evolutionary adaptations in human history. Our ancestors stood up on two legs. Bipedalism, walking on two legs. To us, it seems natural, but among mammals, it's extremely rare. Even among primates, constant bipedalism is unique to humans. Other apes may occasionally walk on two legs, but they prefer quadrupedal movement or climbing. Why was bipedalism advantageous in the savanna? First, it allowed you to see farther. In the tall grass of the savanna, an ape standing on two legs could see above the grass, spot predators from a distance, see other group members, and find sources of food. Second, it saved energy when traveling long distances. Walking on two legs on flat ground is more efficient than moving on all fours. In the savanna, you needed to cover long distance between scattered trees. Third, it freed the hands. This was a huge advantage. Hands could carry food, carry infants, carry tools. You could gather more food at once and take it to a safe place. You could use sticks and stones as tools. Fourth, an upright posture reduced the body area exposed to direct sunlight during the hot midday, helping to avoid overheating. Of course, there were disadvantages too. Bipedalism is slower than moving on all fours. It's harder to run from predators. There's more stress on the spine, knees, and feet, hence our modern back and joint problems. Childbirth became more difficult. The narrow pelvis needed for bipedalism makes it harder for a large-headed baby to pass through. But the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Bipedalism became our path. The first bipedal apes are called australopithecines. Southern apes. They appeared around 4 million years ago. The most famous australopithecine is Lucy. Her skeleton was found in Ethiopia in 1974. Lucy lived 3.2 million years ago. Her species is called Australopithecus afarensis. Lucy was small, about 110 centimeters tall, weighing around 30 kilograms. Her brain was the size of a chimpanzee's and about 400 cubic centimeters, but her pelvis, legs and spine show that she walked upright all the time. Lucy and her kind lived in groups in the savannah. They ate fruits, seeds, leaves, maybe roots and tubers. They might have already begun eating meat, scavenging carcasses, or hunting small animals. The australopithecines existed for about 3 million years, splitting into several species. There were gracile australopithecines, lightly built like Lucy, and there were robust australopithecines or paranthropus, larger and more powerful with huge jaws and teeth for grinding tough plant food. But the most important thing that happened with the australopithecines was the beginning of tool use. Around 2.6 million years ago, the first stone tools appeared in East Africa. These were very simple tools. One stone was struck against another, chipping off sharp flakes. These flakes were used as knives for butchering animal carcasses. The stones themselves from which flakes were chipped were also used as choppers. This technology is called the Oldowan culture, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where the first such tools were found. Who made these tools? Probably the later australopithecines. But new, more advanced species also appeared. Around 2.4 million years ago, Homo habilis, handyman, appeared. His brain was larger than the australopithecines now, about 600 cubic centimeters. His hands were more dexterous. Homo habilis definitely made stone tools. From this moment, the genus Homo and the genus man begins its history. We are no longer just apes. We are human. The use of tools was a huge leap. Tools give power over the surrounding world. With sharp stones, you could butcher animal carcasses, accessing meat and bone marrow that would otherwise be unavailable. Meat is a rich source of protein and energy. This allowed our ancestors to improve their diet. Better diet means more energy for the brain. The brain is a very energy-expensive organ. It makes up only about 2% of body mass, but consumes 20% of all energy. With an improved diet, the brain could grow. And it did grow. Around 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus, upright man appeared. His brain reached 900 to 1,100 cubic centimeters. That's about 2/3 the size of the modern human brain. Homo erectus was tall. Males reached up to 180 centimeters. His body was fully adapted for upright walking and long-distance running. Long legs, narrow hips, short arms. He had probably lost most of his body hair and had dark skin, protecting him from the sun. Homo erectus was a skilled hunter. He made more advanced tools, hand axes, carefully worked on both sides, symmetrical, comfortable to hold. This technology is called the Acheulean culture. And most importantly, Homo erectus mastered fire. The earliest evidence of fire use dates to about 1 million years ago, though some researchers suggest it may have begun even earlier. 1.5 million years ago, fire changed everything. It provided warmth, protection from predators, and light at night. It allowed cooking. Cooked food is easier to chew and digest, and more nutrients can be extracted from it. This further improved the diet and contributed to brain growth. Fire also became a center of social life. People gathered around the fire, shared food, talked. Perhaps it was around the fire that language began to develop, and then Homo erectus did something unprecedented. He left Africa around 1.9 to 1.8 million years ago. Groups of Homo erectus began migrating out of Africa. This was the first time in history that members of the genus Homo ventured beyond the African continent. Why did they set out? Possibly climate changes made some African regions less habitable. Possibly population growth led to competition for resources. Possibly it was simple curiosity and a desire to explore. Homo erectus migrated north across the Sinai Peninsula into the Middle East. From there, some groups went east into Asia, others went west into Europe. Around 1.8 million years ago, people reached the Caucasus. At Dmanisi, in modern Georgia, remains of early Homo erectus have been found. Dmanisi men. They were small people with relatively small brains, but they were already outside Africa. Around 1.7 million years ago, Homo erectus reached Indonesia. On the island of Java, remains of Pithecanthropus or Java man were found. This was an amazing achievement. To reach Java, they had to cross water barriers. Perhaps they built simple rafts or boats. Around 1 million years ago, people settled in China. Sinanthropus or Peking man lived around 750 to 300,000 years ago in caves near modern Beijing. Layers of ash found in these caves show they used fire. Around 800,000 to 600,000 years ago, people reached Western Europe. In Spain, in the Atapuerca Mountains, remains of Homo antecessor, or pioneer man, were found. These were tall, strong people living in a cool climate. Over hundreds of thousands of years, Homo erectus and his descendants spread across Eurasia. They adapted to very different climates, from the tropical forests of Indonesia to the cold steppes of Europe. These populations were isolated from each other for long periods, and they began to evolve in different directions, adapting to local conditions. Thus, different human species appeared. In Europe, around 400,000 to 600,000 years ago, Homo heidelbergensis appeared. They were descendants of the early European populations of Homo erectus. Homo heidelbergensis were large, muscular, with a brain volume of about 1,200 cubic centimeters, almost as large as modern humans. From Homo heidelbergensis in Europe came the Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis. They appeared around 400,000 years ago and lived until about 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals were stocky, muscular, adapted to the cold climate of the Ice Age. Their brains were even slightly larger than modern humans. They were skilled hunters, made diverse tools, used fire, built shelters, and wore clothes made from skins. They buried their dead, which suggests ritual behavior and possibly religious beliefs. In Asia, in the Altai Mountains, in Denisova Cave, remains of Denisovans were found. Another human species that split from the common line around 400,000 years ago. The world was populated by different human species. They coexisted, sometimes even interbred, but they were all our cousins, not our direct ancestors. So where was our species? Where was Homo sapiens? Wise man? We had stayed in Africa all this time. While Neanderthals and Denisovans appeared in Eurasia, evolution continued in Africa. African populations of Homo heidelbergensis or their descendants gradually changed. Around 300,000 years ago, the first members of our species, Homo sapiens, appeared. The earliest fossils of Homo sapiens were found in Morocco at a site called Jebel Irhoud. They date to about 315,000 years ago. These people still had some archaic features, for example, an elongated skull. But their faces were already flatter, like modern humans. The Homo 1 skull found in Ethiopia dates to about 195,000 years ago. This is a fully modern skull, rounded with a high forehead and a protruding chin. What distinguished Homo sapiens from other human species? First, physical features. We have a lighter build than Neanderthals or Homo erectus. We are taller and slimmer. Our skull is rounded with a high forehead and a protruding chin. Our brain averages about 1,350 cubic centimeters, the largest relative to body size of any animal. Second, behavioral features. Homo sapiens made diverse and complex tools. We didn't just chip stones, we made thin, sharp blades, spear and arrow-pointed harpoons, needles. We used bone, antler and wood. We created ornaments. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, shell beads dating to about 75,000 years ago were found. We used ochre, a red mineral pigment, possibly for body painting or creating drawings. We developed complex language. Although it's impossible to say exactly when language appeared, anatomical evidence shows that Homo sapiens had a fully developed speech apparatus. Language allowed us to transmit complex information, teach each other, plan joint actions, and create culture. We developed symbolic thinking, the ability to represent one thing with another, to create abstractions. This is the foundation of language, art, and religion. Around 70 to 60,000 years ago, there was a sudden leap in Homo sapiens behavior. Archaeologists call it the Great Cultural Explosion, or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Tool diversity increased dramatically, art, musical instruments, and more complex burials appeared. People began making figurines and carvings. What caused this leap? Perhaps a certain threshold in brain and language complexity was reached. Perhaps some genetic mutation changed how the brain worked. Or maybe cultural knowledge accumulated until quantity turned into quality. In any case, around 60 to 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was ready for the next step. We left Africa again. Around 70 to 60,000 years ago, a small group of Homo sapiens left Africa, maybe only a few hundred or a couple thousand individuals. They crossed the Bab el-Mandeb Strait or the Sinai into the Middle East. From this group came all non-African populations of modern humans. We are all descendants of these first migrants. Why did they leave? Maybe Africa's climate became harsher due to the Ice Age. Maybe population growth caused competition. Maybe they simply followed the animals they hunted. The first region they settled was the Middle East. Here they met Neanderthals. These two human species coexisted, and as genetic data shows, they sometimes interbred. About 2 to 4% of the DNA of modern non-African people comes from Neanderthals. This means our ancestors and Neanderthals had common descendants. From there, people moved on. One branch went east along the southern coast of Asia. Around 60,000 years ago, people reached India. Around 50,000 years ago, they reached Southeast Asia and Australia. The settlement of Australia was especially impressive. To get there, they had to cross hundreds of kilometers of open ocean. This means people already knew how to build reliable boats. Another branch moved northeast into Central Asia. Here in the Altai, people met Denisovans. Genetic traces of Denisovans are found in some modern populations, especially in Melanesia and Australia. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens entered Europe. Here, they met Neanderthals again. For a while, the two species coexisted, but gradually the Neanderthals disappeared. Around 40,000 years ago, they went extinct. Why did Neanderthals die out while we survived? It's a complex question. Perhaps we were more social, forming larger and more complex groups. Perhaps our language was more developed, giving us an advantage in transmitting knowledge. Perhaps our technology was slightly more efficient, or maybe it was just luck, a small advantage that accumulated over time. Around 30 to 25,000 years ago, people reached Siberia, and from there across the Bering Land Bridge, a stretch of land that connected Asia and America at that time due to lower sea levels during the Ice Age. They entered the Americas. Around 15 to 14,000 years ago, people spread throughout North and South America, reaching the southernmost tip, Tierra del Fuego. Around 1,200 years ago, Polynesians in their ocean-going canoes reached the last major uninhabited lands, New Zealand, Hawaii, and Easter Island. So over 60 to 70,000 years, Homo sapiens populated the entire planet. We became the only human species inhabiting Earth. We were on every continent except Antarctica. We adapted to tropical jungles and Arctic tundra, to high mountains and deserts, to islands and continents. Throughout all this time, we remained hunter-gatherers. For most of our species' history, about 300,000 years out of roughly 315,000, we lived as hunter-gatherers. What does that mean? Hunter-gatherers didn't grow food. They gathered it from nature. They collected wild plants, fruits, berries, nuts, roots, seeds. They hunted animals from large game like deer, mammoths, and bison to small creatures, birds, and reptiles. They fished. They gathered shellfish and insects. They lived in small groups, usually 20 to 50 people. These groups were very mobile. They moved across a territory following seasonal food. In spring, to places where early berries ripened. In summer, to lakes and rivers where fish were abundant. In autumn, to forests where nuts ripened. In winter, hunting large animals. Their social structure was egalitarian, relatively equal. There were no rigid hierarchies, no chiefs with absolute power. Decisions were made together. Resources were shared among group members. Their knowledge of nature was astonishingly deep. They knew hundreds of plant species, which were edible, which were poisonous, which had healing properties, when and where to find them. They knew animal behavior, could read tracks, predict herd movements. They were skilled craftspeople. They made tools from stone, bone, wood, and antler, stone points for spears and arrows, scrapers for processing hides, knives, awls from bone, sewing needles, fishing harpoons. From wood, spears, boomerangs, spear throwers. They made clothes from animal skins, adorned themselves with beads and necklaces, painted their bodies. They created art. In the Chauvet cave in France, drawings 32,000 years old, horses, rhinos, lions, depicted with astonishing skill. In Altamira in Spain, bison, painted in red and black 14,000 years ago. On cave walls worldwide, handprints, abstract patterns, images of animals and humans. They made figurines. The Venus of the Paleolithic. Female figures with emphasized features, dating from 40 to 10,000 years ago. Perhaps they were symbols of fertility, motherhood, female power. They buried their dead, sometimes with tools, ornaments, ochre. This suggests beliefs in an afterlife, respect for the deceased. They told stories. We don't know these stories, and they weren't written down. But we know they existed. All known hunter-gatherer societies have rich oral traditions, myths, legends, tales. Now, these stories explain the world, passed on knowledge, entertained, taught. Hunter-gatherer life wasn't a paradise. Infant mortality was high. Injuries, disease, attacks by predators or hostile human groups were dangers, famine in lean years. But this life had advantages too. The workday wasn't long, 3 to 5 hours a day getting food. The rest of the time was for rest, socializing, play, creativity. The diet was diverse and healthy. Physical activity kept the body fit. And so humanity lived for tens of thousands of years, slowly accumulating knowledge, technology, culture. And then about 12,000 years ago, a new era began, an era that would change everything. 12,000 years ago, the last ice age ended, the glaciers retreated, the climate became warmer and more stable. In some regions in the Middle East, in the so-called Fertile Crescent, conditions became especially favorable. Warm climate, enough rain, wild grains and animals. People in these regions began to notice that if grain seeds fell on the ground, new plants would grow from them. They started experimenting, deliberately sowing seeds, selecting plants with the best characteristics. Thus, agriculture was gradually born. At the same time, they began domesticating animals. First dogs, they helped with hunting, then sheep, goats, pigs, cattle. Animals provided meat, milk, skins, wool. They could pull plows, carry loads. With the advent of agriculture and herding, people became sedentary. They began building permanent settlements. Villages appeared and then cities. And in this transition from hunting and gathering to farming, people began to build something new, something that would become a symbol of this new era. In southeastern Turkey, on a hill called Agat Göbekli Tepe, 11 to 12,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers built the first known monumental temple complex. Massive stone pillars weighing up to 16 tons, decorated with animal carvings. Foxes, gazelles, snakes, birds, circular structures nested within each other. All this was built by people who didn't yet know agriculture, had no permanent settlements, no metals. They were hunter-gatherers. This wasn't just a temple. It was a milestone, a sign that people could come together for a common purpose, create something grand, beyond mere survival. Hundreds of people must have worked together to quarry these pillars from stone, move them, erect them. Someone had to organize, plan, feed the workers. Göbekli Tepe stands at the threshold of two worlds. On one side, the world of hunter-gatherers, where our ancestors lived for hundreds of thousands of years. On the other, the world of civilization, with cities-states writing about to begin. Some scientists even suggest that the need to maintain such a grand structure might have pushed people toward agriculture. To feed the workers building the temple, stable food sources were needed. Hunting and gathering couldn't reliably feed a large group of people engaged in construction. Perhaps the temple itself drove people to domesticate plants and animals. If you want to learn more about Göbekli Tepe, and what happened next, how the first cities, writing, and states appeared. That's a topic for another conversation. That's the story of the first civilizations, the story of Sumer, Egypt, the first cities, and it has already been told. If you're interested, check out our previous video about Göbekli Tepe and the birth of civilization. There, we start with this amazing place and go further to the first cities, first kings, first laws. And now, we are at the end of this amazing journey. We started with the large synapsids of the Permian, with Inostrancevia and Moschiops, ruling the Earth 300 million years ago. We survived the Great Permian-Triassic extinction, when 95% of all life died. We became small when dinosaurs appeared on Earth, became nocturnal, fur-covered, warm-blooded creatures hiding in burrows. We survived the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs, thanks to the very qualities that dinosaurs forced us to develop. We came out of our burrows, climbed into the trees, became primates. We came back down to the ground, stood on 2 legs, began using tools. We left Africa twice. First as Homo erectus, populating Eurasia. Second as Homo sapiens, populating the entire planet. We survived ice ages, encounters with other human species, countless dangers and challenges. And here we are, at the end of this amazing journey. We started with the large synapsids of the Permian, with Inostrancevia and Moschiops ruling the Earth 300 million years ago. We survived the Great Permian-Triassic extinction, when 95% of all life died. We became small when dinosaurs appeared on Earth, became nocturnal, fur-covered, warm-blooded creatures hiding in burrows. We survived the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs, thanks to the very qualities that dinosaurs forced us to develop. We came out of our burrows, climbed into the trees, became primates. We came back down to the ground, stood on 2 legs, began using tools. We left Africa twice. First as Homo erectus, populating Eurasia. Second as Homo sapiens, populating the entire planet. We survived ice ages, encounters with other human species, countless dangers and challenges. And here we are, the only surviving species of the genus Homo, descendants of those tiny creatures hiding from the dinosaurs. Our path was not predestined. It was not inevitable. At every stage, we could have disappeared, like millions of other species did. If the asteroid hadn't struck 66 million years ago, maybe dinosaurs would still rule the Earth, and mammals would remain small, nocturnal creatures. If Africa's climate hadn't changed 7 million years ago, maybe our ancestors would never have come down from the trees. We are here because of an incredible chain of events, coincidences, and adaptations, because of billions of our ancestors who survived long enough to pass their genes to the next generation. Today, all life on Earth, every person, every animal, every plant, is only 1% of all species that have ever existed. 99% are gone forever. We are that 1%. We got incredibly lucky. And now, after all this journey, we stand at the threshold of a new era. An era when humans build civilizations, create art and science, explore space, and ask questions about the meaning of existence. But that's another story. The story of civilization, and it will be told another time. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. Listen to this story, relax. Until next time.